We are here at Rick's Welding. Ryan is going to help us, and let's take a look at the shop. We already brought the truck in. He's actually going to let me help, which is fantastic, you know, with my minimal skill set. And we are going to start with the cab floor. So I'm going to take out all of this, start prepping everything underneath of here, and we are going to get the tubing for the floor done so that I can finish it, paint it, and then put in a real floor in the back here. So that'll be a huge milestone. Then we'll have the back of this cab, the floor done at least. Let's get started. All right, we got the floor out. And the next thing we're gonna do, Ryan has allowed me to prep the area to save on cost, which is super cool. So we're gonna be welding a bar, something like this. It's gonna be going across there. So I need to prep the area, take off all this paint and rust, and get it ready to be welded. We're also gonna cap each one of these open tubes. So I'm gonna also take all the paint off of there so we can weld on those. One more tube that needs to be capped, and then the last one is right here. So I'm just gonna get all that ready so he can just come over here and only weld. All right, we are cutting the tubing. Hannah, what are you doing? What's going on? Is there something up in the tree? All right, next up we need to tackle this floor finally. I'm not going to replace the floor yet. I think I have found something that might work for the floor here. I know a lot of people are saying just reuse the plywood. What's wrong with the plywood? Well, my plywood has big holes right here where this used to be a step. So without welding in some reinforcements, I can't even plug those holes with a separate little piece of plywood. And if I'm going to put a bunch of little pieces together, I'd rather just put in new plywood. Also, it's very weathered, and it has some water damage in the corners. I think there were some sort of fire extinguishers that were sitting here in the corners, and I think those leaked. This piece is pretty good. It's pretty intact. But this piece for sure has a lot of water damage in this corner, so that would have to be replaced. So I guess I could just replace that piece, but then like I said, I've got these makeshift covers on here right now covering these big holes. So I'd rather just put something new in there. And if I'm going to do that, I would like to get something that has better insulation than that. And I know people said plywood actually has really good insulation, but I don't think it has good insulation compared to fiberglass reinforced panels with the foam in there. I can't imagine those are even on the same ballpark, which is what I am looking at. There's a place out in Riverside that has them, and I'm going to go look at them and see if those will do the job. Obviously it'll be a lot more expensive than plywood, but I only have this one small area, so even if it's a couple $100, it would be worth it, especially if it's highly insulated. Then I can just put the one sheet down and call it a day. And I think the way I would attach it, which some people were concerned about, I think I would just probably Sikaflex or some other kind of adhesive around the edges. I have this lip here all the way around. Just adhesive it down. Adhesive it and points on this, maybe not the whole thing. So if I ever needed to pull it up, you know, I wouldn't want to have to deal with all of this frame, and I don't think it would need it. You have some air pushing up from here, but I don't think it's that considerable. Actually, I know that because I've driven on this, and I forgot to bolt down the plywood, and it started coming up when I was on the freeway, and I just put something on top of it and held it down. It wasn't even that heavy, so it's not a ton of force. I need to get this done and painted before we get on the road, which is 2 weeks, because we can't go into wet areas like Colorado and then possibly onto Washington and have bare metal. That's just not going to fly. It's already starting to rust a little bit. I mean, this is just surface rust, but this is California, so it's going to be way worse there. So I have to get it covered and treated. So at the very least, we'll do that and get the plywood on here. And if I get frisky, I'll go and get that other stuff and put it on here. So that's it for right now. All right, after Gina and I both spending multiple days and many hours using all this stuff, grinding, sanding, wire wheeling, steel wool, you name it, we finally got this to a place that we like. So both doors, since I welded this piece on the bottom here, that was bare metal, so that needed to be done. And then we had a little bit of corrosion, not much in the very bottom here, because obviously water comes in and sits down there. But I really didn't want to, I can't do the whole door, that's silly. So where do we stop? And this is still in good condition, most of this paint, and there's no rust anywhere else on the door. So I just went up just a tad bit. We're going to pour 15 all of this because it won't be in the sun, and that will encapsulate any rust that we did miss. And I know it doesn't look like much, but that's as good as we can get it with the amount of time we have. This isn't a restoration or anything, so the main thing is just to stop the rust. Then we move into the frame for the back. This is that new piece that we put in, so that was bare metal as well. That has to be coated in something, so let's do the whole floor while we're at it. And same thing, we didn't go to bare metal throughout the entire thing. Some places we did, but this coating that's on here already, this black stuff, it seems to be way more than just paint, because it takes a lot to come off, and it gets really gummy when you try to sand it off. We went through a lot of sanding discs, so, and I can't get up underneath this too well. What I've decided to do is just mainly do the top layer, so the tops of everything is nice and smooth, there's no rust, and then try to get the sides as much as I could. We hit them all, and we spent a lot of time on all of them, so they're pretty smooth, the flakes are gone, any little tiny rust spots that there were are gone, and we're just going to cover this whole thing and pour 15. We're going to clean it really well, and then cover it and pour 15 and hope for the best. I'm doing this cab in pieces. I could, do the whole thing. That's way out of my energy scope. So I just want to get the floor done and in, and then we can start worrying about the walls later. And especially the back wall, which does actually have some rust. That has the most amount of rust because there are some tiny leaks up top, or were. I think I've fixed those. But the back wall is we're going to do a pass through, so we're going to end up having to weld in framing here and cut a big hole. So there's no point in doing any kind of anything to the paint right now. So we got to wait until we have the back on, and then we've decided on the pass through and how we're going to do that. So for now, this just stays. And then the roof needs to be done, but we need to take the roof off before we can deal with any of the rust that's up there. That's probably the most rusted part, is the sheet metal on the two sides of the roof. So anyway, back to the bottom. Let's keep it as small chunks. We're going to go ahead and prep this and paint this now. And the way we're going to do that is with Pour 15 metal prep. We got to etch it first after we've cleaned it, and then we do the paint. This is just gloss black, and this, apparently you can paint directly over rust with this, so I'm not worried about painting over some older paint or protective coating. Alright, so we have finished with soapy water cleaning the entire area that will be painted, and then using alcohol, straight alcohol, to wipe it down as well. Next, we've got a spray bottle full of the metal prep, and we're just gonna spray a coating on that.
It's gotta stay wet for at least 20 minutes.
Yeah, spray it on. It said any bare metal needs to stay wet for 20 minutes. I don't know about non-bare metal. Alright, so we sprayed the etcher on, let it sit for 20 minutes. You can see how it's all kind of discolored and etched. And after that, we took wet rags, just plain water. Hey Gina. And wiped everything down with water, wiped off the etching solution. Gonna let that dry for a couple minutes, and then we get painting. Finally. Alright, we are done with the first coat of Pour 15. Nice, pretty black paint job. So we need to let this sit 3 to 6 hours, and then we can put a second coat on. So we are going to let this sit all night because it's getting a little too dark to even be able to see, even though it's only 3:30. So we're going to let this sit until tomorrow, and then we'll put our second coat on. And we did it without getting black paint all over the outside of the door. It's a bit touch and go there for a while. I was freaking out a little bit, but we got it done. Alright, see you tomorrow. Alright, it is a new day, and we are looking to do a second coat of Pour 15 on this truck. Here is what the finished version of coat 1 looks like. Looks pretty good, feels pretty good. This stuff feels completely different than regular paint. It's like almost rubbery, but it's not soft at all. So, great feel, because that's what everybody wants, is a good feeling paint. So anyway, there's the door, that looks good. The other one looks good. Next up, second coat, and then we will be done with this part of the floor, and we just need to cover it somehow. Alright, the back of the cab is as done as it's going to get before our trip. So the bottoms have all been painted. That's done forever. That's great. I cut a new piece of plywood for this side, which replaces this one, which had the cutout, which we don't want, and the water damage. That's 3/8 inch plywood, which is pretty much the same as that. And then I reused that piece over there, and I cut a small piece to fill in the gap. And I had to cut the opening a little bit bigger so that that piece would sit on the crossbars. But it's bolted down, or should I say screwed down temporarily. It's not screwed down everywhere. Like I said, eventually I'd like to get rid of this completely and go with something that's a little more insulated and less wood so that the water won't affect it. Now, George did contact me from Unimog Center, who's the guy who sold this to me, and he recommended staying with the plywood and then maybe go to a boat supply and do fiberglass over the top of it. So that's also a pretty good idea. So I'm going to look into that and see if that makes sense. And then I could just do resin or fiberglass over the top of the wood and then put insulation over the top of that. So that could work. We'll see. At that point, I would probably buy a little bit thicker plywood and try to cut it a little nicer and screw it in everywhere. So that's done. I also went through and cut these rubber pieces off to the right height, and those go all the way up and around. And this stuff, actually, you can kind of crimp it together so that it sticks better. So that's in there really nice. That was falling out before. We painted the doors underneath, as you saw. I put sound dampening material on the inside of this panel and then the inside of the actual door skin, so this panel. So you can tell the difference maybe on, I'm not sure if you can do it in the video or not, but totally different. Even here, I don't know if that's better or worse, but the sound dampening stuff should keep that from vibrating and making more noise than we would want it to. So eventually we'll do the insides of these as well. But for now, since I had them apart, those are done. And that is all I am going to do for this floor. So the next step, I need to build out the kitchen, quote unquote. Okay, I'm going to put the refrigerator back here and storage for all of our kitchen stuff, since it'll be near the fridge. And then make sure the dogs have room, and maybe put that bench back in here if we have room for it. So that's next. Hello there. So it has been some time since a couple seconds ago you saw in that video. That was us preparing to leave California, and I think it's been at least a month. So we are currently in Washington, in a small town about 2 hours from Seattle over the pass, and it is much colder here, as you can see. And I just wanted to show you how the back of the truck ended up with the floor. So let's go take a look. So first of all, we mounted the steps. This is where they were before. Same mounting system I had before. This ended up working out fantastically for the dogs, getting them in and out. It's very quick to deploy and put back away. It's very flexible in where the steps need to be, which is really nice. Like, I can have them really narrow here up close to the truck when there's something in the way, or we can pull them out further when we have more room. So my parking job is awful here right now, but so this is very handy. Up in here we had the dog food bin, which was mounted here and strapped down, and that fit perfectly. And then this is the cabinetry that I made. So I didn't bore you guys with a bunch of crappy cabinetry work on YouTube. I'm sure you can find plenty of that, and you can find the good stuff on YouTube too. So this is not that. This is very quick, very cheap, very simple, but we just basically made a cabinet, mounted the fridge. I ran electric underneath the truck to the back, and there's a very simple door which stores a bunch of our stuff. I bought these a while ago from a company, I think it's called Expedition Outfitters. Anyway, it seems to be a side company of Total Composites. They sell a bunch of gear to put in your Total Composite box. I got those. Those are pretty nice, actually. They have dividers that you can move around and set up based on what you have in here. And they're all stackable, so that's nice. So we have all of our stuff in there. For the kitchen, The fridge ended up working out great. I will say though that these fridges make a lot of noise. They rattle, especially the glass shelf. It rattles. I don't know how you fix that. I mean, the food and stuff is also going to rattle, so it vibrates a lot and makes you think the truck is broken, and then you realize, oh, it's just stuff in the fridge. So that's, I guess, a relief once you do figure that out. Over here, we just built this simple cabinet with a top that opens up, and just a ton of storage in here. We stored all of our food in here. Right now I have our med kit in there and our thermoses and stuff. Most of the stuff is inside since we've been staying here. And over there is just a backpack full of stuff we might need. So very simple. It's mounted to the back wall. It's mounted to the floor. And that has been great, actually. Nothing's come loose. It's been solid. It's a kind of a cool place for the dogs to sit when they get bored sitting on the floor down here. And we usually cover the floor with their dog beds. So not the warmest thing in the world, but they are German Shepherds, so they seem to do okay. And that's it for the back here with the floor. So currently this is our setup. It's kind of nice to put something in there and then just use it to see what works and what doesn't work, what we like, what we don't like. And so far this has worked out pretty well. So that's it for now, and the floor in the back. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you soon.